My granddaughter leaned closer and whispered something so chilling, I almost dropped my teacup. The late afternoon sun was spilling across my kitchen table, warm and golden, and for a moment, life felt peaceful. I had baked cookies earlier, and the sweet smell still lingered in the air. My granddaughter sat across from me, dunking one into her milk, her little legs swinging beneath the chair. This was my favorite time of day, quiet, safe, filled with her laughter. But the innocence of the moment cracked when she leaned across the table, her voice low and serious. "Grandma," she said, glancing toward the door as if she was afraid someone might hear. "Mom said you wouldn't notice if your things went missing." My heart stopped. The teacup slipped in my hand, clinking loudly against the saucer. I forced a smile, though my pulse was hammering. I reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "Sweetheart, what do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She shrugged, her eyes wide with the confusion only a child could carry. I heard her on the phone. She was laughing. She said, "You're old, and you don't keep track of your stuff." She said, "You wouldn't even notice if your jewelry was gone." Her words cut deeper than she could have ever known. My daughter-in-law, the woman I welcomed into my home, trusted with my son, trusted with this little girl. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Can you tell me exactly what you heard, darling?" I whispered. She nodded eagerly, unaware of the storm she had just unleashed in me. She said she was going to the store, but then she told someone she'd stop by a shop first. She laughed again and said, "Mom won't know. She never does." The room suddenly felt colder. I glanced at the window, though nothing had changed outside. Inside, everything had. I forced another smile for my granddaughter's sake. "Thank you for telling me, sweet one. You did the right thing." Her little brow furrowed. "Am I in trouble?" "I didn't mean to tell a secret." "No," I said softly, brushing her hair back from her face. "You're never in trouble for telling me the truth." We finished our cookies, but the sweetness had turned to ash in my mouth. I kept my voice light, asking her about school, her friends, anything to push her mind away from what she'd revealed. But mine couldn't escape. When she left with her father later that evening, I stood alone in the quiet kitchen. The silence was heavy, pressing down on me. I looked at the little china teacup still sitting on the table, and noticed how my hands trembled when I picked it up. Could it be true? Could my daughter-in-law really be stealing from me? I walked slowly to my bedroom, my heart pounding harder with each step. Opening my jewelry box, I stared down at the velvet-lined compartments. Something felt off. The gold bracelet my husband gave me on our 30th anniversary. I couldn't see it. I closed my eyes, willing myself to remember. Had I moved it? Misplaced it? No. I always kept it in that box. Always. I sank onto the bed, gripping the edge of the mattress. My granddaughter's words replayed in my head, echoing louder and louder. "Mom said you wouldn't notice if your things went missing." The betrayal stung sharper because it came from within the family. A stranger stealing would be a crime. A daughter-in-law stealing was an insult to trust, to love, to everything I had built. I tried to breathe, but it felt like the air had thickened. My mind raced. If she took the bracelet, what else had disappeared? And if she was laughing about it, if she was bold enough to talk on the phone where her own daughter could hear, then this wasn't small. This wasn't careless. This was a plan. I rose to my feet, a new weight settling in my chest. Not just fear, but the beginning of anger. My granddaughter's innocent words had opened a door I could never close again. I looked once more at the empty space in the jewelry box. My heart hardened. If she had taken that, then I needed to find out what else she had already stolen. And I had the terrible feeling. It was far more than just small items. At dinner that night, I watched my daughter-in-law smile across the table, and all I saw was a mask. The dining room was glowing in soft light. My son carved the roast chicken. My granddaughter chattered about her school project, and the clinking of silverware filled the air. To anyone else, it looked like a picture of family harmony, but I sat across from her, studying every move she made, every word that left her painted lips. She laughed at something my son said, leaning close to him as if she were the perfect wife, the perfect mother. But I couldn't stop hearing the words my granddaughter had whispered to me earlier. "Mom said you wouldn't notice if your things went missing." I stirred my vegetables slowly, forcing myself to keep my voice light. "I thought I misplaced something today," I said casually, glancing at her. Her eyes flicked toward me, quick as a spark, before she plastered on that warm smile. "Oh, Mother," she said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "You worry too much. Relax." I held her gaze for a heartbeat, then lowered my eyes to my plate. "Of course. You're right." My words were soft, but inside, I felt the steel of certainty begin to form. The rest of dinner passed in forced cheer. I answered my granddaughter's questions, nodded at my son's stories, but my focus never left her. Her laugh rang too loud, her touches lingered too long. She wanted me distracted, lulled, comfortable. When the plates were cleared, I excused myself, claiming I needed to rest. My son kissed my cheek, and my granddaughter hugged me tight. "Good night, Grandma," she whispered. That small squeeze gave me strength. I walked to my bedroom, closing the door behind me. My hands trembled as I opened the jewelry box again. This time I forced myself to look carefully. My heart dropped. The pearl earrings my late husband gave me were gone. The sapphire brooch I wore on holidays, gone. One by one, the spaces stared back at me, empty, silent proof of betrayal. I sat on the edge of the bed, my chest tightening. There was no mistake. She had stolen from me, and she thought I wouldn't notice. But I did. Later that night, as she passed my room to fetch her purse from the hallway table, I saw an opportunity. When she stepped into the bathroom, leaving the purse half open on the chair, I slipped into the hallway. My fingers shook as I pulled the flap aside. Inside were the usual things: lipstick, phone, loose change. But tucked into the corner was a folded slip of paper. My breath caught when I pulled it out. It was a receipt. The ink was smudged, but the words leapt out at me. City, Pawn, and Jewelry. Listed beneath it were descriptions that made my stomach twist. Gold bracelet. Sapphire brooch. My sapphire brooch. I froze, staring at the crumpled paper in my hand. It was undeniable. She hadn't just thought about stealing. She had done it. She had carried pieces of my life, my memories, into a pawn shop and traded them for cash. I shoved the receipt back into her purse, my pulse racing. My granddaughter's innocent confession had been the spark, but this was the flame. Proof. Cold. Hard proof. As I returned to my room and closed the door softly behind me, I pressed a hand to my chest. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. The mask she wore at dinner was slipping, and now I had seen the truth underneath, and tomorrow I would find out just how deep her betrayal really went. The pawn shop's neon sign buzzed like a warning when I walked in with trembling hands. The air inside was heavy with dust and the faint metallic tang of old coins. Glass cases lined the walls, filled with tarnished rings, scratched watches, and forgotten treasures that once belonged to someone who cared. The harsh fluorescent lights flickered, making everything feel just a little more sinister. I clutched the crumpled receipt I had found in my daughter-in-law's purse. Every step I took deeper into that shop felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Behind the counter, a stocky man with thinning hair looked up. His eyes narrowed as soon as he saw me. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone clipped, guarded. I steadied my voice. "I'm here about some jewelry that was sold to you recently. A gold bracelet, a sapphire brooch." His lips pressed into a thin line. "Ma'am, we don't give out customer information." I placed the receipt on the glass counter between us. His eyes flickered down, then back up at me. For a split second, I saw recognition. "Lady," he muttered, his voice dropping. "I don't want trouble." My heart pounded, but I leaned in, my voice low and firm. "You'll have more trouble if you don't tell me the truth." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. His reluctance hung thick in the air. Finally, he said, "All right, yes, those items came through here. A woman sold them about 2 weeks ago." My stomach churned. "Describe her." He hesitated, then shrugged. Dark hair, mid-30s, pretty, kept glancing over her shoulder like she didn't want to be seen. Said she needed quick cash. It was her. My daughter-in-law. I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. "Do you still have the items?" I asked. He shook his head. "Already sold. That stuff moves fast. I keep records, though." He pulled out a worn ledger and flipped through the pages, then slid a photocopy across the counter. My bracelet, my brooch, reduced to lines of ink on a piece of paper. I swallowed the ache rising in my throat and slipped the copy into my purse. "Thank you," I said quietly. He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "She sold more than you know." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" He looked around, lowering his voice further. "She brought in more than jewelry. Talked about accounts, money, said she was going to bleed somebody dry before they ever noticed." My knees went weak. I steadied myself on the counter, forcing air into my lungs. Accounts. She wasn't just taking trinkets. She was after everything. I forced my voice to stay calm. "Did she say whose accounts?" He shook his head quickly. "No names. Just said the old woman won't see it coming." A shiver ran through me. That old woman was me. I straightened, summoning what dignity I had left. "If the police come asking, you'll tell them everything. Won't you?" His eyes darted to the door, then back to me. "Lady, I told you I don't want trouble. "You'll have more than trouble if you stay silent," I said sharply. My voice didn't shake this time. "You'll have the law breathing down your neck. Remember that." He gave a reluctant nod. I turned and walked toward the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. The buzzing neon sign followed me out into the street, the sound like a warning bell. Outside, the cool evening air hit my face, but it did nothing to calm me. My hands trembled as I dug into my purse, gripping the photocopy of the pawn slip. Proof, solid proof that she had stolen from me. But the words of the shop owner echoed louder than the traffic around me. "She sold more than you know. Accounts. Bleed somebody dry." I had thought this betrayal was about a bracelet, a brooch, a few cherished heirlooms. But it wasn't just jewelry. She was reaching for something much bigger, and for the first time, I realized she might already have her hands inside my bank accounts. I logged into my account that night and felt the blood drain from my face. The glow of the laptop cast long shadows in my study, making the room feel colder than it was. The clock ticked past midnight, but sleep was impossible, not with the pawnshop receipt still burning a hole in my pocket. My fingers trembled as I typed in my banking password, praying I was overreacting, praying this wasn't what I thought. But the numbers told a different story. My balance, my hard-earned savings, the money I had carefully tucked away for years, was gutted. Entire lines of withdrawals appeared in neat digital rows, each stamped with my name, each draining me a little more. 10,000 here, 5,000 there. My account looked like a battlefield, pillaged and broken. I covered my mouth with my hand, choking back a sound that was neither cry nor scream. No mistake, no clerical error. This was deliberate. And then I saw it. The signature verification. A scanned copy of my own name, slanted just slightly wrong. The loop of the Y too shallow. The tail of the N too sharp. Forged. My daughter-in-law hadn't just stolen trinkets and jewelry. She had invaded the deepest sanctuary of my life, my finances. I forced my hand to steady as I dialed the bank's emergency line. "Customer service. How may I help you?" A polite male voice answered. "This is Mrs. Harris. I need to report fraudulent withdrawals. Someone has been taking money from my accounts." The officer paused, then tapped at his keyboard. "Ma'am, the withdrawals matched your ID. The system confirmed your signature." I bit down so hard I tasted copper. My voice came out low, measured, but edged with fire. "That ID was stolen. The signature is forged. I am telling you I did not authorize a single withdrawal." Silence on the line. Then carefully, "I understand, Mrs. Harris. I'll freeze the account immediately and flag it for investigation. Do you want to press charges now?" The word charges echoed in my mind. The sensible answer was yes. Yes, press charges. End this tonight. Let the law swallow her whole. But another voice hissed in my ear. "Not yet. Don't show your hand until you know everything." "Not yet," I said, exhaling slowly. "Just send me copies of every withdrawal, every statement. Email and hard copy." "Yes, ma'am." "Consider it done." I hung up, the room suddenly too still. The printer in the corner hummed to life, spitting out page after page of evidence. Cold, damning proof that the woman who smiled at me across the dinner table was carving away my life behind my back. I spread the pages across my desk. Each line, each forged withdrawal was a knife in the ribs. The money wasn't just cash, it was trust. It was security. It was freedom. And she had stolen it without flinching. My phone buzzed on the desk, jolting me. The screen lit up with her name. Daughter-in-law. I stared, my chest tight. A text appeared. "Don't go to the police." "Let's talk." The words blurred for a moment as rage surged in me. How did she know I had discovered the theft? Had she been watching me? Or was she so arrogant she thought she could bargain her way out of this? I wanted to hurl the phone against the wall, shatter it to pieces, but I forced myself still. My hands clenched the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. She was cornered. That much was clear. And cornered people made mistakes. My eyes returned to the paperwork scattered like battlefield debris across my desk. The bank was frozen, the jewelry gone. But this wasn't the end. No, this was the beginning of something far bigger. For the first time, the fear inside me hardened into icy clarity. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a hunter. I picked up the phone, reread her message, and felt the faintest curl of a smile touch my lips. If she wanted to talk, I would let her. But it would be on my terms, and when the time came, she would realize too late that I already had the proof to destroy her. When she suggested we clear the air over coffee, I agreed, but I was already recording. The cafe smelled of espresso and cinnamon, a harmless, cheerful place. It should have been easy to sit and let her talk. Instead, every nerve in me was awake. I tucked my phone inside my palm, the recorder app on, its tiny red dot a secret that steadied me like a talisman. She arrived with that practiced smile, hair perfect, perfume light enough to smell like a promise. My son trailed behind, oblivious to the undercurrent I carried. She kissed his cheek and then sat across from me, folding her hands like an actress waiting for her cue. "Thank you for meeting me, Mother," she said, her voice syrup smooth. I watched her every flicker, the blink that lingered too long, the way she smoothed her skirt as if to iron out a lie. "I wanted to talk," I said, keeping my tone low. "We should clear the air." She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that tries to charm and deflect at once. "Of course. You worry too much. You always have." Her smile showed no guilt, only confidence. I stirred my coffee slowly. "Do you remember telling your daughter something earlier?" I asked, letting the question hang. She blinked, then shrugged like it was nothing. "What did she say?" "She told me you said I wouldn't notice if my things went missing." I watched her for any sign of flinch. Her hand tightened around her cup. "That's childish. Kids repeat things." She lifted her chin, pretending annoyance. "You know how she is, always making mountains out of molehills. You think I won't believe my granddaughter?" I asked, my voice calm but edged. "You think I don't keep track of my things?" Her smile thinned. "We all know you have many things, Mother. You remember, your jewelry, your everything. I just meant, well, you're a generous person." Her words wavered, and for a moment the mask slipped. "You sold some of my things," I said plainly, and the recorder in my hand hummed like a hidden heartbeat. She blinked fast. "Sold? That's ridiculous. I would never—" She stopped herself, eyes darting to the door as if searching for witnesses. "I only helped when you misplaced things. You forget where you put things sometimes. You pawned a bracelet and a brooch," I said, watching her face. "A shopkeeper remembered you. He even gave me a receipt." I slid the photocopy across the table. Her fingers brushed it, then recoiled. She swallowed. It was cash. "I needed money." Her voice faltered, and then she tried another angle. "You don't understand how hard things are for us. You owe me after all you've done for my son." She shot back suddenly, the old accusation flaring up like a wound exposed. Her voice snapped. I felt it in my chest. I kept my voice quiet, measured. "So you think stealing is fair repayment?" I asked. Her jaw worked. "I'm not proud of it," she hissed, leaning forward. "But you left us no choice. Your son, my husband, works himself to death, and still it isn't enough." She spread her hands, palms up, as if pleading for sympathy. I forced myself to look at her like she was a stranger in a crowd. "You decided what you were entitled to." My fingers tightened around the table edge. "You decided to take without asking." Her eyes flashed with something dark then. Shame, maybe, or anger. She tried to turn the conversation, to guilt me into silence. "You never helped us. You always act like you're above it all." Her voice dropped low, venom barely contained. "You should be grateful for what I do for this family." I felt the old loneliness swell, the years of small dismissals, the evenings I stayed up worrying while she slept. But I kept breathing. I asked the questions that mattered, steady and precise, coaxing answers without accusation so they would come out raw and true. "Did you take more than jewelry?" I asked softly. Her hands trembled for half a second. Then she laughed too loudly. "I told you money was tight. It's not just small things, no. I paid bills. I paid debts." Her eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might break. "You lied on my checks," I said, feeling the words like cold steel. "You forged my name. You took my savings." She went very still, and the world narrowed to the space between us. The recorder's red dot glinted, patient and judgmental. She leaned in close, voice a hiss meant only for me. "If you tell anyone," she whispered, grabbing my hand so hard my knuckles hurt, "you'll regret it." Her fingers were like iron. "Do you hear me? You'll regret it." I felt the cafe fall away, the murmurs of strangers, the clatter of a spoon, and all that remained was the pressure of her grip and the black, seething promise in her eyes. The hand that held mine was a warning and a threat, and beneath it I felt the truth settle. She knew how to scare me, but she had also just admitted enough for the law to listen. The recorder kept humming, and for the first time since this began, I smiled, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I finally had the confession I needed, wrapped in the very threat meant to silence me. I dialed the number with steady fingers. Enough was enough. The living room was quiet except for the low hum of the lamp by my chair. My desk was no longer just a desk, it was a battlefield. Paperwork spread out like sharpened blades. Bank statements, pawn slips, photocopied receipts. My phone, still glowing with the recording app, lay on top of them like a loaded weapon. I stared at the mess I had gathered, at the proof of betrayal, and felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just about my money or my jewelry. It was about dignity, about refusing to be prey in my own home. The fear was there. Yes, fear of what would happen to my family, fear of my son's face when the truth fell on him like a hammer. But another voice, quieter and stronger, said, "If you don't act, she'll keep taking. She'll ruin more than you." I pressed the call button. "Police dispatch. What's your emergency?" "My name is Mrs. Harris," I said, my voice steady. "I need to report theft, fraud. I have evidence, and I'm ready to file a formal complaint." There was a pause on the other end, then a calm voice guiding me through details. Within an hour, 2 officers stood in my living room. Their uniforms looked almost out of place against the floral wallpaper and family photographs that had once been symbols of warmth. I laid everything out on the coffee table. One officer took photographs while the other leafed through each paper, his brow tightening as the pile grew. "You've done the right thing," the older officer said finally, looking me in the eye. "This isn't the first complaint about her." The words sank like a stone into my stomach. "Not the first?" I asked, my throat dry. He shook his head, flipping through his notes. "Your daughter-in-law, she has a record. Fraud charges in another city. She used different names, but the pattern matches. Jewelry theft, forged checks, drained accounts. Some cases never went to trial because families stayed quiet." I sat back, my fingers cold. All this time I had thought I was the first, the unlucky one she had chosen. But no, I was just another mark on a long list. "Then this will be the last time she hurts someone," I said, each word slow and deliberate. My voice surprised me. It wasn't shaky anymore. It was steel. The officer nodded. "That's the right way to think about it. We'll need your full statement and a copy of the recording." I slid the phone across the table. "It's all here." Her own words. "Threats, admissions." The younger officer pressed the play button. My daughter-in-law's voice hissed through the room. "If you tell anyone, you'll regret it." Even replayed. It made my skin crawl. But this time I didn't shrink from it. I let it play, proof echoing through my home like a curse finally broken. They asked questions. Dates, times, details. I answered them all. With every word I felt lighter, as though the burden I had carried alone was being lifted, piece by piece, and placed into official hands. When the paperwork was finished, the older officer closed his folder. "We'll move quickly on this. She's still living in your home?" "Yes." My heart clenched. "Then we'll make the arrest there. We'll need you present when we serve the warrant." For a moment, the air seemed to vanish from the room. To see her confronted, cuffed, taken away in front of my son, it felt unbearable. The family would shatter in that moment. But what was the alternative? To let her stay? To let her poison the walls of my home with lies and theft? I clasped my hands together until my knuckles ached. "Do what you must," I whispered. The officer's gaze softened. "I know this is hard, but you've shown strength most people never find. And you're protecting more than yourself. You're stopping her from destroying anyone else." When they left, the house was too quiet. I looked again at the spread of evidence on the table. These weren't just papers anymore. They were the story of my betrayal and my survival. Fear still curled in my stomach, yes, but it no longer ruled me. What I felt now was grim relief, the kind that comes only when a decision has been made and there's no turning back. My phone buzzed again, a text lighting up the screen. This time it wasn't her. It was the officer. "We'll come tomorrow evening. Be ready, tomorrow." Tomorrow the truth would walk into my home, wear a uniform, and call her out for who she really was. Tomorrow the mask would shatter, and the family I had tried so hard to hold together would finally see the cracks I had been staring at all along. I turned off the lamp, leaving the room in darkness, but the glow of resolve burned brighter than ever. She raised her glass at the table, boasting as if she'd already won, until the knock came at the door. The dining room flickered with candlelight, just as it had weeks before. The smell of roast chicken and baked potatoes filled the air, but I tasted nothing. My son laughed at something trivial. My granddaughter picked at her peas, and across from me, the woman who had gutted my life raised her wine glass high. "To family," she said, smugness curling in her voice. "Always sticking together." She smiled straight at me as if daring me to flinch. Her confidence was thick, suffocating. She believed she had won, that her threat at the cafe had buried me in silence. She thought my quiet meant defeat. I kept my gaze on my plate. Let her gloat. Let her believe. The knock at the door cut through the laughter like a blade. Sharp. Unexpected. My granddaughter looked up, wide-eyed. My son frowned and rose, muttering something about late deliveries. But when he opened the door, 2 uniformed officers stood framed in the porch light. Their presence filled the house heavy and undeniable. "Good evening," one said. His tone was calm, practiced. "We're here for Mrs. Harris's daughter-in-law. We have a warrant for her arrest." For a second, the room froze. The clink of silverware stopped. The candle flame trembled in the draft. Then she laughed. Too loud, too bright. "What is this?" she demanded. "A prank?" "Some mistake." The officers stepped into the dining room, their presence swallowing the space. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and theft." My son's face drained of color. "There must be some misunderstanding. This is a mistake," she screamed, her voice shattering the air. She shoved back her chair, knocking it over, and pointed across the table. "She's framing me. This bitter old woman wants to ruin me." I didn't move. My hands stayed folded neatly in my lap. I said nothing. I didn't need to anymore. The officer pulled a small recorder from his pocket and pressed play. Her own voice hissed through the room, filling every corner. "If you tell anyone, you'll regret it." The sound was unmistakable. Her tone, her threat, her guilt. The color drained from her face, then flooded back red-hot with rage. "That was taken out of context." "You can't use that," she shrieked, but her voice cracked now. The officer stepped closer, steady as stone. "We have your voice on tape. You're under arrest." He turned her toward the door. "Stand up. Hands behind your back." She fought, clawing at the air as if she could grab hold of the life slipping away. "No, you don't understand. He needs me." She turned to my son, desperation breaking through the fury. Tell them I didn't do this." My son's mouth opened and closed, words failing him. His eyes darted between her and me, and in them I saw the fracture of his world. The cuffs clicked around her wrists, the metallic sound final and merciless. My granddaughter clutched her spoon like a lifeline, her eyes round and unblinking. She looked to me, confusion and fear pooling in her gaze. I reached under the table and squeezed her small hand, steady and warm. The officers led her toward the door. She twisted once more, thrashing against their grip, her hair falling from its perfect style. But then her eyes locked on mine. No words now, just a glare, cold, chilling, a promise sharpened into silence. It wasn't over, that look said. Not for her, not for me. And as the door shut behind them, the house trembled with the echoes of her screams, leaving only silence, heavy and final, hanging over the broken dinner table. The house was quiet again, but not empty. My granddaughter's laughter filled the space her mother had poisoned. The stillness that followed her arrest felt almost unnatural. For weeks, tension had lived in these walls like a shadow, pressing against every corner, seeping into every word. Now it was gone. What remained was the fragile sound of healing, my granddaughter giggling as she tried to braid her doll's hair at the kitchen table. I sat beside her, sipping tea, the same ritual I had once feared would be shattered forever. The china cup didn't tremble in my hands this time. My heart beat steady. The storm outside my door finally calmed. She looked up at me suddenly, her small face thoughtful. "Grandma, is Mommy coming back?" The question pierced deeper than any threat her mother had thrown at me. I set my cup down carefully. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "your Mommy made some choices that weren't right. She has to take responsibility for them." Her lip quivered. "But she's still my mom." I reached out, smoothing her hair back, feeling the ache of her innocence. "And you're right. She will always be your mom. That doesn't change. But here," I tapped her chest lightly, "here in your heart, you can remember the good things. And here in this house, you'll always be safe." Her shoulders relaxed, and she leaned against me, comforted not by easy promises but by truth wrapped in love. Later that night, when the dishes were cleared and my granddaughter tucked in, my son lingered in the doorway of the living room. His face looked years older, his eyes hollow from battles I hadn't been able to fight for him. "Mom," he began, his voice breaking. I should have listened sooner. I looked up from the papers still scattered on the table, the remnants of the fight we had won. His admission cut through me, because I had prayed for those words and feared I would never hear them. He stepped closer, his hands restless. I saw things, little things. The money that never stretched, the excuses, the way she twisted words. I told myself it was stress, or my fault, or anything but her lies. I didn't want to lose her. His voice cracked, and in protecting her I almost lost you. I rose and crossed the room, placing my hands on his shoulders, the way I had when he was a boy who had fallen too hard. "We all see the truth in time," I told him gently. "What matters is what we do after." His eyes filled, and for a moment he simply nodded, unable to speak. In that silence, I felt the years of motherhood, the sacrifices, the loneliness, the prayers whispered into dark rooms. They had led to this moment. Not victory over her, but the return of my son to honesty, to me, to himself. Over the next days, we set new boundaries. My accounts were locked tight, passwords changed, papers filed safely. I taught my granddaughter small lessons too, about trust, about speaking up, about courage. She soaked them in, as if she understood that her little whisper had been the spark that saved us all. The house grew warm again. Not perfect, never perfect, but real. Real laughter, real tears, real healing. Each sound of my granddaughter's joy stitched something back together inside me. One evening, as I stood by the window watching the last light fade, I whispered to myself, never again would I swallow truth for the sake of peace. Never again would I stay silent while someone poisoned my family from within. Silence had once been my prison. Now my voice was my promise. And though the scars of betrayal would always live in me, I carried them not as wounds but as warnings. Because dignity, once lost, can be reclaimed. And I had reclaimed mine. One whisper, one truth, one act of courage at a time. Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from family, but it also teaches who truly stands by your side. The morning was cool, soft light spilling across my garden as if the world itself had exhaled after a storm. The roses I once neglected bloomed freely again, their fragrance drifting through the open window. I sat on the bench with a steaming cup of tea, my hands steady at last. The chaos had passed. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was healing. I had survived betrayal, not from strangers, but from those who had shared my table, my roof, my trust. And yet, as I watched my granddaughter chase butterflies among the flowers, I realized betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had revealed me. It had forced me to see the strength I carried all along. The hardest part hadn't been calling the police, or standing silent as handcuffs clicked shut. The hardest part was knowing that justice meant breaking apart my son's family. But in the stillness of this morning, I finally understood. I hadn't broken the family. Truth had. Lies had done their damage long before I ever spoke. My son came outside, weary but lighter somehow. He sat beside me without speaking at first, just watching his daughter laugh. Then finally he said softly, "Mom, I should have listened sooner." His voice cracked under the weight of regret. I placed my hand over his. "We all see the truth in time. What matters is what we do after." He nodded, eyes fixed on his little girl. "She saved us, didn't she? Without her, we might have lost everything." I swallowed the lump in my throat. He was right. My granddaughter's courage, her honesty, had been the spark that lit the truth. Without her confession, without her warning, my savings would have vanished. My home, my independence, everything I worked for, gone. I called her over, and she skipped across the grass, cheeks flushed with sunlight. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out a small locket. It had been my mother's and then mine. I pressed it into her hand. "Your truth gave us freedom," I told her, fastening it around her neck. "Never doubt how much power honesty carries." Her eyes widened, tears glistening. She threw her arms around me, and in that embrace, I felt something mend inside me that I thought was broken forever. Forgiveness still lingered at the edge of my thoughts. Could I forgive my daughter-in-law? Perhaps one day, but forgiveness does not erase accountability. Justice had taken its course, and she would face the weight of her choices. I didn't hate her anymore. Hatred was too heavy to carry. What I carried now was resolve. Resolve to never again silence my instincts. Resolve to protect what I had built. Resolve to teach my granddaughter that strength and kindness can live together. That silence in the face of betrayal is not love, but surrender. The garden was alive with color, my granddaughter's laughter weaving into the morning breeze. I sipped my tea and let the warmth spread through me. I had lost much, but I had gained something far more enduring: clarity. I turned to the audience of my own thoughts, to anyone who might walk a similar path. Betrayal will come. It always comes from the hands we least expect, but what you do in its wake defines you more than the betrayal itself. I lifted my gaze toward the horizon and whispered the question I now leave to you. Would you stay silent, or speak up no matter the cost? If this story kept you watching, don't forget to subscribe for more. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my place?